In 1975, a family moved into their dream home. But soon enough, this happy story would take a very dark turn, ultimately becoming one of the most famous, terrifying paranormal cases of all time. It was even turned into a very popular Hollywood horror film that absolutely gave me nightmares as a child. Anyways, sit back, relax, and grab some snacks. But remember, if you enjoy creepy, interesting, and thought-provoking content, make sure you subscribe for more, and please, drop a like to show some love. Now let's get into this very strange story. In 1975, George and his wife, Kathy Lutz, were out venturing for a house in Long Island, New York. They were getting ready to start a new chapter with their very happy 3 children when eventually they finally stumbled across what they thought would be their perfect family home. This big, beautiful house that they found was one of those situations where it was almost too good to be true. I mean, this place was huge. It had 6 rooms, it was 2 stories. It even had an awesome heated pool outside that the children would obviously love. Plus, it had a boathouse out back right along the river so they could all go paddle boats together. I mean, this was literally most everybody's mind's eye of the perfect family home. And all for the slim price of $80,000, which at the time was actually a steal. Their sights were set. They wanted this place more than anything. But more importantly, they just wanted a safe, happy environment for their 3 kids to hopefully make some amazing memories with. George and Kathy obviously decide to buy it, but as they're learning more information about this too good to be true home, they eventually find out why it was so well priced. And after learning the horrifying news behind the history of this home, their jaws literally dropped. You see, to get the full rundown behind this terrifying paranormal story, we kind of have to take a step back by only 1 year. It was a quiet, peaceful night in 1974. The DeFeo family, which were the previous owners of this home George and Kathy are about to buy, are all getting ready to go to bed. Everything was fairly normal. It was just an ordinary day like any other. The only difference was things had been really tense for this family the past few months. Previously to this shocking night, there was a lot of arguing going on in this home, and the main issue was between their oldest son, Ronald Jr., and the father. You know, this was the cliche parent versus resentful son battle. It was mainly over money, lack of responsibility, and authority. Pretty much the most common altercation kids have with their parents. Only thing was, Ronald Jr. was 23 years old, so I could kind of see where this father was coming from. Regardless, there was a lot of built-up aggression in this young man, and leading up to this night, which was November 13th, 1974, Ronald Jr. would end up doing something so disturbing that it's known as one of the most shocking crimes in American history. Around 10 p.m. that night, neighbors would eventually call the police after reportedly hearing gunshots coming from the DeFeo's home. Now keep in mind, this was known to be a very safe, small, chill town. I mean, most of the residents thought it was just fireworks going off because of how uncommon anything violent like this were to happen. Now, if it wasn't for the multiple loud, clear as day gunshot noises coming from this house, nobody might have called. But thankfully they did. Only thing was, when authorities finally arrived, they were far too late. While everyone was peacefully sleeping, Ronald Jr. would cautiously creep through the house, tiptoeing through the place with his fully loaded .35 caliber rifle. With his weapon, he silently snuck into his parents' room, where he then proceeds to disturbingly take the life of both his mother and father. Afterwards, he continued his evil wrath by going into each one of his siblings' rooms, where he also horrifically takes the life of all 4 of his brothers and sisters, leaving them eerily deceased in their beds with wounds either in their heads or in their backs. Now, when police arrived and saw this very terrifying crime scene, Ronald Jr. instantly claimed this was all the result of some insane mob hit. And honestly, for the time, it was somewhat believable. But later that same day, Ronald Jr. would quickly confess to his crime, with him ultimately stating, "It was the voices that made me do it." Now, this famous statement kind of helped transpire this whole situation into something more paranormal, or even demonic, one could say. At trial, Ronald DeFeo Jr. was eventually charged with 6 counts of second-degree murder and was sentenced to 6 consecutive terms of 25 years to life, absolutely shocking the whole entire nation in 1974. Fast forward to 1975 after George and his wife Kathy hear this horrifying backstory for the first time, right before purchasing this vast home. Some may think they would have second thoughts about buying this property, but surprisingly, it didn't seem to worry them too much. I mean, it definitely gave them chills, but the fact of the matter was this deal was just too good to pass up. So the happy couple signed on the dotted lines and the home was officially theirs. The future seemed bright for this ordinary family, and there's no doubt they were all extremely thrilled to start a new chapter in their life. Almost instantaneously, they move into this place. You know, the kids were cheerful, running around, picking out their rooms, exploring this big, vast house, but almost immediately, the excitement began to fade when strange occurrences started happening that everyone obviously noticed. From the very beginning, right when this family stepped into their new home, something just felt off. Almost like that gut feeling you get when something bad is about to happen. But you know, George and Kathy just kind of brushed it off, and their explanation was, it's probably just that feeling you get when you move into a new environment. And they reassured everyone that they're positive. Everything will get better over time. Well, ironically enough, things only got progressively worse. It started off with very weird, somewhat explainable events, such as the house becoming freakishly cold even when the fireplace is lit and the heat was running. Also, there were very strange random scents of perfume, which none of the kids claimed to use. Same with the wife, Kathy. Then the husband, George, suddenly fell into this deep, dark state of depression. But keep in mind, this was a very well-rounded individual. George served some time in the military, and once he got out, he then opened up a business, which went on to become decently successful. So George always had a rather healthy amount of self-esteem. And for him to wind up in this low mental state was all very new to him. Things got even weirder when he found himself obsessing over the fireplace. George would literally spend hours tending this fire because he claimed he began to feel so cold that he was almost shivering to the bone, which is very odd because we're talking about George, this big, broadly macho man Marine. Over the next several days, the family just could not keep ignoring the amount of strange things happening in this home. The doors were somehow constantly aggressively slamming on their own. There was this disgusting foul odor of what seemed to be something decaying, but no one could ever find the source. Swarms of flies started infesting the inside of their house, which the family couldn't get rid of. But on top of all this chaos, the parents and the kids all began having extremely disturbing nightmares. So this house, that they thought would be their big, beautiful, fresh start, ended up turning into their real-life horror story. One night, when George was casually walking through his home, he suddenly felt a strange presence in the room, almost as if someone or something was standing right next to him. He quickly yells out, "Kathy," but there's no response. Then suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he notices something through one of the windows. At this point, his heart is racing. As he steps closer, sweat drops literally begin to form on his forehead. And don't forget, we're talking about this big macho man Marine, George, but at this point, fear has completely taken control. George finally gets close enough to this window to get a better view of what's outside, and what he saw next literally made his heart sink. Off in the distance, George would describe seeing 2 bright glowing red eyes. These demon eyes that scared the living crap out of him were clearly associated with the strange presence he felt earlier. It just didn't make any sense. Regardless, whatever this was drew George towards this window and truly wanted him to know that it is watching him and his family. George instantly turned and tried to get someone to come look at whatever he saw, but soon as he turned back, this mysterious creature vanished into thin air. But little did he know whatever this thing was would end up sticking around a lot more than expected. One afternoon, Kathy began noticing that her young daughter named Missy was being a lot more imaginative than usual. Missy was going around the house talking and playing with what she told her parents is her imaginary friend. Curious, Kathy eventually pulled Missy to the side and asked her, "Who is this imaginary friend of hers?" And when Missy replied, Kathy was absolutely petrified with fear. Missy went on to tell her mother that her friend was named Jody, and he was this big, flying, dark, pig-like creature with bright, glowing red eyes, and that Jody visits her at night by watching her from the window. At this point, Kathy did not know what to say. She obviously didn't want to scare her daughter, but quickly, she tells George to kind of reassure him of what he previously saw. And ironically, this news almost relieved George because it helped him confirm he was not going crazy. From that point on, the home just spiraled into insanity. The paranormal events were just undeniable at this point. Windows would slam shut, then somehow be ripped open. Crucifixes on the walls were being flipped upside down. And apparently, a strange, unexplained green ooze started forming out of the cracks and keyholes all around the home. This family was truly being tortured. And when they tried reporting this to the authorities, there really wasn't much they could do. Obviously, explaining the situation to the police just made George and Kathy sound absolutely nuts. So after some research, they finally decide to call a priest. Over several attempts were made to get a priest to visit their property, but each time, right before stepping into their home, the priest would suddenly feel so severely ill that it was almost as if they needed to go to the hospital right away. This clearly prevented any of them actually being able to help this family because none of these priests were willing to put their lives in jeopardy, which makes sense. Kathy and George were pretty much pushed to their breaking point. George became more distant and irritable. Kathy apparently started getting physically attacked, waking up with these very strange welts, almost as if someone was hitting her while she was sleeping. At this point, it was just unsafe being in this home. But even through all of this craziness, they were still not going down without a fight. After attempting to do a blessing ritual on their own, they truly saw the power of this demonic entity that they were dealing with. As they were reciting these religious words, the home began violently shaking, almost as if an earthquake was literally happening at that moment. Furniture was moving, cabinets were flying open, and all of a sudden, a very disturbing, creepy black figure randomly appeared in their living room, letting them know this was his home and he is not going anywhere. After their failed attempt, things continued to get worse. The family kept getting tortured. Missy, their young daughter, started seeing Jody, her imaginary friend, a lot more than usual. There was just really not much else they could do to fix this horrible situation. The final night, which apparently was the worst night of all, even though if you were to ask me, I would have left a long time ago. Something so terrifying happened that it finally convinced this family to immediately leave. They would go on to describe a chaotic chain of events that forced these people out of their home. It started with doors viciously slamming, then the house began to vibrate, shaking everybody to the core. George and Kathy reported that their children literally began levitating off of their beds in front of their eyes, and simultaneously, that dark, demonic, shadowy figure reappeared right out of their floor while this powerful gust of wind swept through the house. At this point, the situation was life-threatening. George and Kathy finally look at each other and go, "Screw this." Even though they had to leave everything behind, all the money they invested, that big, beautiful home they hoped to make amazing memories in, all of it was gone. But either way, it was not worth the trouble. The truth was, the most important thing to them was the safety and well-being of their children. After a long, grueling 28 days, the family finally left and never returned. This case eventually went on to become one of the most famous paranormal cases in history, and it's called the Amityville Horror, which is also a very well-known movie and book. What's funny is this is one of the first paranormal movies I ever saw as a child. It both terrified the crap out of me, but absolutely pulled me into the world of mysteries. This house went on to be investigated by numerous paranormal investigators, including Ed and Lorraine Warren, which most people learned about from the Conjuring movies, which actually backed this family's claim by stating there was a very powerful demonic presence in this home. There was also a very famous photo taken of what appears to be the spirit of a young boy who may have once lived in this house and could have very well been one of Ronald's victims. Now, I'm both a skeptic and a believer because I truly think there is more to life than this. But either way, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And remember, everyone, if you enjoy creepy, interesting, and thought-provoking content, make sure you subscribe for more. Peace out, everybody. Have an amazing day. I will see you on the next one.